My name is Harper Lewis, and the story I am about to share begins on the day I gave birth to my son. It should have been the happiest moment of my life. Instead, it became the moment everything I believed about my marriage collapsed in front of me. I remember waking up in that small county hospital room. The lighting was dim, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant, and beside me, in a borrowed plastic bassinet, my newborn son slept under a thrifted baby blanket I had washed a dozen times. I was exhausted but proud. I had done everything on my own, or at least that was what I thought. Then the door opened and my father, Richard Lewis, walked in wearing the same tailored coat he wore to board meetings. He was not supposed to be there. We had grown distant over the years, and I never imagined he would show up unannounced. He took one look around the room. The thin curtains, the shared hallway noise, the worn baby blanket. Then he looked at me and asked something that made my entire world tilt. "Harper," he said, "was the $7,500 I sent you every month not enough?" At first I honestly thought he was joking. $7,500 every month, for me. But when he kept staring, waiting for an answer, I knew he was dead serious, and that question cracked open the truth I had been blind to for 3 years. A truth involving my husband, Adrian West, and his mother, Linda. Let me take you back to where it all began. When Adrian West and I first got married, I truly believed we were building a simple but honest life together. Adrian worked as an office assistant at a small logistics company. His paycheck was modest, but I thought love and teamwork could make up for whatever we lacked financially. I was wrong about that. Shortly after the wedding, his mother, Linda West, insisted we move into her house. She said it would save us money and help us get on our feet. But once we moved in, it became painfully clear that Linda did not want to help us. She wanted to control us. Every dollar Adrian earned went straight into her hands. He would hand her his paycheck on the first Friday of every month, and she would tuck it into a floral envelope as if she were the family treasurer. She told me it was tradition. She told me it was her role. She told me it was none of my business. Meanwhile, I received a tiny allowance for groceries and household items, just enough to keep the house running but never enough to feel secure. If I needed shampoo, I had to ask. If I needed a maternity shirt later on, I had to justify why. Linda watched everything I did. She commented on how much laundry soap I used, how long I spent in the shower, and which brand of cereal I bought. Adrian always shrugged and said she meant well. He grew up with her rules, so to him, this was normal. But to me, it felt like slowly drowning. The more Linda tightened her grip, the more Adrian backed away from responsibility. He became comfortable letting her make every decision, and I found myself married not to a man, but to a boy still clinging to his mother. I tried to hold on, I tried to stay optimistic, but the cracks in my marriage were already forming. I just did not realize how deep they would eventually go. By the time I found out I was pregnant, the cracks in my marriage had already widened into something I could no longer ignore. Still, I tried to believe that a baby would bring us closer, that Adrian would finally step up, that Linda would soften. None of that happened. The day I told Adrian I was expecting, he smiled, kissed my forehead, and said he was happy. But before we even finished celebrating, he added that we should tell his mother so she could plan the finances. My stomach dropped. I knew what that meant. And I was right. Within an hour, Linda had a list of rules. No unnecessary spending, no buying maternity clothes unless I absolutely outgrew my current ones. No prenatal vitamins because, according to her, they were just marketing nonsense. She insisted I drink cheap powdered milk instead. From then on, everything became harder. I worked as a freelance designer from a small desk crammed between the laundry machines. Projects came in at random hours, and I took every one because I needed money for things Linda refused to pay for. Some nights, I stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning trying to finish assignments, my back aching, my eyes burning, my hands shaking. There were moments I will never forget, like the day I craved fresh strawberries and hesitated for 10 minutes in front of the store display. Because they were $9. $9. I ended up walking away, embarrassed that something so small felt so out of reach. Another time, when I asked for $20 to buy prenatal vitamins, Linda snapped that I was acting spoiled and wasting resources. Adrian just stood beside her, silent, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he did not want to confront anything. As my belly grew, so did my loneliness. I attended every prenatal appointment alone. I paid every medical bill with the small income I scraped together. I bought second-hand baby clothes, washed them carefully, folded them like they were treasures. I kept telling myself that once the baby arrived, everything would feel worth it. I had no idea that the truth waiting for me in that hospital room would break my heart in a completely different way. The morning I went into labor, the house was strangely quiet. Adrian was already at work, and Linda acted annoyed that I was making a fuss over the contractions. She drove me to the hospital but dropped me off at the entrance, saying she had errands to run. I did not see her again for hours. I checked myself in, breathing through the pain as the nurse led me to a small shared maternity room. It was the only one my insurance covered. The ceiling tiles were yellowed, the curtains barely clung to their rails, and every sound from the hallway drifted straight into the room. Still, I told myself it did not matter. I was finally going to meet my son. Labor stretched on for hours. I kept glancing at the door, hoping Adrian would walk in, but he never did. Linda eventually showed up around noon with a fast food bag and asked if I had eaten. I told her I was already past the eating stage. She shrugged and said, "Well, suit yourself." By the time my son arrived, I was exhausted, shaking, and overwhelmed with emotion. The nurse wrapped him in a thin baby blanket I had bought secondhand and placed him on my chest. I cried quietly, whispering apologies to him for not being able to give him more. The next morning, as I sat alone holding my newborn, the door opened. My father, Richard Lewis, stepped inside. My father, who rarely left his office, who never visited unannounced, who had barely spoken to Adrian in years. His eyes swept across the small room, the outdated equipment, the thin hospital sheets. Then he looked at my son, wrapped in that worn thrift store blanket, and something shifted in his expression. "Harper," he said slowly, "was the $7,500 I sent you every month not enough?" I stared at him, confused. $7,500 every month, he repeated the question, waiting for an answer I could not give. In that moment, everything around me seemed to freeze. The soft beeping of the monitor, the muffled voices in the hallway, even my breathing stalled. I had never received a single dollar from him. And I suddenly knew that whatever truth was coming next was going to change my life forever. Before I could even process what my father had just said, the door swung open again. Adrian walked in with a bright smile, carrying a glossy shopping bag. Behind him, Linda followed, adjusting her gold earrings, as if she were arriving at a brunch reservation instead of a hospital room. My father stepped aside, folding his arms as he studied them both. His silence alone made the air tighten. Adrian leaned down to kiss my forehead. "You look great, Harper. I brought you something," he said, pulling out a brand new designer robe. The kind I had admired online but never bought because it cost more than our weekly grocery budget. "Where did this come from?" I asked quietly. Adrian chuckled. "A gift. Don't worry about it." My father cut in sharply. "A gift," he repeated. Interesting choice of words. Adrian blinked, confused. Linda narrowed her eyes. "What exactly are you implying, Richard?" My father did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "I am implying that I have sent my daughter $7,500 every month since her wedding day, and I want to know which one of you has been taking it." The room fell silent. Adrian froze, the robe still dangling from his hands. Linda's face drained of color, then flushed red so quickly it looked painful. "Dad," I whispered, "what are you talking about?" "Your husband insisted on managing the account for both of you," Richard said. "He told me you preferred privacy. So every month I wired him the money. Over 3 years. I did quick math in my head. It felt like my brain was splitting open. $7,500 times 36 months. $270,000. Gone, used, spent, without my knowledge. Linda recovered first. She tossed her hair and scoffed. That money was for the household. I handled the finances like any responsible mother. My father turned to her, his voice ice cold. "And yet my daughter has been paying her own medical bills, buying second-hand baby clothes, working late nights just to afford vitamins?" Adrian's mouth opened and closed like he was drowning in air. "I can explain," he muttered. "Explain that you stole from my daughter," Richard asked, "or that you let your mother live off money meant for her and my grandson." Adrian dropped to his knees beside my bed. "Harper, please, I did it for us. Mom needed help. I thought you would not understand." I stared at him, numb. He had let me struggle. He had watched me drown in anxiety and exhaustion while thousands of dollars sat in his mother's purse. And in that moment, I finally saw Adrian for who he truly was. Hearing my father lay out the truth should have made everything instantly clear, but instead it felt like my mind shattered into 100 blurry fragments. Memories I had tried to ignore, moments I had brushed aside, all came rushing back with sharp new meaning. I remembered the night I worked until 3 a.m, swollen ankles propped on a stack of books, trying to finish a freelance project so I could afford a better stroller. Adrian had walked past me on his way to the kitchen, glanced at my screen, and said I should not push myself so hard. Then he went back to bed without even offering to help. I remembered standing in the produce aisle craving strawberries, staring at a $9 container for so long that an employee asked if I needed assistance. I walked away empty-handed because $9 was too much. Too much, while thousands were being funneled into Linda's shopping sprees. I remembered asking for prenatal vitamins and being told I was acting entitled, that mothers in the past survived without them, so why couldn't I? Adrian had stood behind his mother silently, avoiding my eyes. Every scene replayed in slow motion, every sacrifice, every humiliation, every moment I told myself that this was temporary, that they meant well, that love required patience. But now, with the truth exposed, those memories twisted into something far more painful. They were not misunderstandings, they were not innocent mistakes, they were choices. Choices made at my expense. Linda crossed her arms and said, "Harper is dramatic. She never appreciated what we did for her." I almost laughed, appreciated what they watched me struggle. They let me believe we were poor. They let me think I was failing as a wife and mother because I could not provide more. My father placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Harper," he said quietly, "you do not have to stay in this." His voice cut through the fog. Clear, steady. A lifeline I did not know I still had. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something inside me shift. Something heavy beginning to lift. Something in me snapped then, not in anger but in clarity. It was as if a door I had been afraid to open finally swung wide, and I could see the truth standing in front of me with nowhere left to hide. I shifted my newborn gently in my arms and looked at Adrian, really looked at him. The man kneeling beside my hospital bed was not a partner. He was someone who had allowed me to suffer while he lived comfortably under the excuse of helping his mother. Someone who watched me struggle and never once stepped in. Someone who chose silence every time he should have chosen me. Adrian reached for my hand. "Harper, we can fix this. Just give me a chance." "No," I said softly. "No more chances." Linda scoffed loudly. "Do not be foolish. You need stability. You need family." My father stepped forward. "She has both," he said calmly. "Just not in this room." He made one quick call, and within minutes 2 attorneys from his firm appeared at the door. They carried folders, pens, and an air of unwavering professionalism. Adrian's eyes widened as they explained that temporary custody, a restraining request, and preliminary divorce paperwork were ready for my signature. Adrian's voice cracked. "Harper, please, you can't do this." But I could, and I would. I looked at my father. "Dad, take me and my son out of here." He nodded once, a silent promise. Linda shouted that I was ungrateful, that I was breaking the family. But the family she spoke of had never included me, not really. It had only used me. The attorneys helped me sign what needed to be signed. A nurse arrived with a wheelchair. As she gently settled me into it, I held my son close, feeling his tiny heartbeat against mine. And as the wheelchair rolled out of that small, suffocating room, I knew I was leaving more than a hospital behind. I was leaving an entire life I no longer wanted. Leaving the hospital felt surreal. The cold air hit my face as my father's driver opened the car door, and for the first time in months, I inhaled without feeling like something heavy was sitting on my chest. My son slept peacefully in my arms, unaware that his entire future had just shifted. My father guided me into the back seat as if I were made of glass. We drove in silence for a while, the city passing by in blurred streaks of gray and blue. I kept staring at my baby, tracing the tiny curve of his cheek, wondering how close I had come to raising him in a home built on lies. We eventually pulled into an underground garage beneath a tall glass building. I frowned. "Dad, where are we?" "Somewhere safe," he said simply. When the elevator doors opened on the 50th floor, I stepped into a penthouse that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft cream furniture, a kitchen bigger than the entire West household. Everything smelled clean, warm, untouched by resentment or control. I felt out of place, overwhelmed, but also strangely calm. "Dad," I murmured, "I can't stay here. This is too much." He shook his head. "Harper, you deserve peace. You deserve space to breathe. Stay here until you are ready to decide your next steps." I swallowed hard. "I don't want to depend on you forever." He softened. "Then build something that belongs to you." His words settled in my mind like seeds. I looked down at my son. Maybe starting over did not have to mean starting from nothing. That night, as he slept beside me in a quiet room that finally felt safe, I made myself a promise. I would rebuild my life, not for revenge, not to prove anything, but to give my son the world I never had. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the marble floors, warming the air in a way I hadn't felt in years. I held my son against my chest, rocking him gently while I gazed out over the skyline. The world looked different from 50 floors up, quieter, almost forgiving. After breakfast, prepared by a chef who insisted on making me a plate worthy of a 5-star hotel, I finally gathered the courage to talk to my father. He was in his study, already dressed, already working, already composed. Seeing him like that made me realize how long I had spent shrinking myself to survive. "Dad," I started, feeling my pulse in my throat. "Thank you for everything, but I need to tell you something." He looked up from his papers. I could see the tension come over him, as if he was preparing for the worst. "I can't live like this forever. I'm grateful, but I can't just sit here being taken care of. I don't want to be a burden, not to you, not anymore." "A burden," he repeated the words slowly, as if tasting something bitter. "Harper, you were never a burden. They made you believe that because it benefited them." I shook my head. "I don't want anyone to rescue me. I want to build something myself. I want to work again." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "And what exactly do you want to build?" I took a breath. "A baby goods and modest wear brand. Quality pieces that real mothers can afford. Elegant, simple, functional, clothing and products I wish I had when I was pregnant. I already have sketches." For a moment he said nothing. Then slowly a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "That fire in your eyes, Harper. That was your mother's fire. If this is what you want, I'll help you. But not with gifts, with a loan. A real business loan. You'll earn every step." Relief washed over me. I nodded, grateful. "Dad, that's all I ever wanted. A fair chance." 3 months passed in a blur of late nights, early mornings, and countless sketches scattered across my dining table. My father held true to his word. He didn't coddle me, didn't hand me shortcuts. Instead, he introduced me to his branding consultants, market analysts, and manufacturing contacts. I attended every meeting with Elias sleeping in a carrier pressed against my chest. Some nights I cried from exhaustion. Some nights I cried from pride. My best friend, Maya, stepped in as my operations manager. She had always been the loud, fiery one between us, and she handled suppliers the way a lioness handles threats. Soon the three of us became a tiny engine of ambition. The brand's name came easily, Harper Lane, a name that sounded warm, breathable, a name I felt belonged to the woman I was becoming. When the first samples arrived, I held them in my hands for a long time. Soft cotton blankets trimmed in clean stitching. Modest nursing tops that felt elegant without trying. Baby carriers I would have killed to have when I was pregnant. Real items for real mothers. Dad inspected them too. Instead of his usual stoic business face, he softened. "Your work has heart," he said. "You're not just selling things, you're solving the problems you lived through." The manufacturing run began. Marketing campaigns rolled out. Influencers reached out. Stores placed orders before our official launch date. The night before our grand opening, I stood inside the boutique as workers arranged displays. The soft glow of the overhead lights reflected off polished wood shelves lined with products I had once only imagined. My imagination felt like it had stepped into the real world and stretched its arms. I picked up a small blanket, the first design I'd sketched after leaving the hospital. I ran my hand across the fabric and whispered to myself, "We made it, baby boy. We really made it." Launch day arrived like a dream wrapped in nerves and adrenaline. People lined up outside the boutique before sunrise. Mothers with strollers, young families, even curious shoppers who had seen our ads. Maya paced back and forth, rehearsing her welcome speech while I stood frozen, holding Elias against my shoulder. "You built this," she whispered. "Don't forget that." When the doors opened, applause broke out, cameras flashed, influencers went live, reporters asked questions. Customers rushed inside, touching the fabrics, holding up outfits, admiring the craftsmanship. I felt overwhelmed, but in the best possible way. Dad stood near the back, arms crossed, pride radiating off him so strongly I could feel it across the room. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. His silence was a warm hand on my shoulder. By noon, half our inventory was gone. By closing, nearly everything had sold out. That night, as we reviewed the numbers, Maya screamed so loudly that the cleaning crew came running. "We are profitable on day one," she shouted, throwing her arms around me. I didn't scream. I didn't jump. I simply held Elias close and let the truth settle into my chest like a soft sunrise. I had built something real, something mine. But while my world was rising, I later learned that somewhere across the city, Adrian's world was collapsing. He had jumped from job to job since the divorce. Most places fired him within weeks. His reputation followed him like a stain he couldn't wash out. His mother, once the queen of social gatherings, now lived in a cramped room she shared with 3 strangers. The jewelry she'd once bragged about had long been sold for grocery money. They didn't know it yet, but life was preparing a reckoning for both of them, a different kind of justice. 6 months later, Harper Lane had grown beyond anything I expected. We had expanded into 2 more locations, hired a team of seamstresses, and partnered with a community center to provide work for single mothers. I found joy in the chaos of entrepreneurship, in late nights filled with sketches, in early mornings spent feeding Elias before meetings. But the part of myself I cherished most was the peace. No walking on eggshells, no begging for basics like vitamins or groceries. No shrinking to make someone else comfortable. Just me, my son, my work, and a father who finally knew how to show up. On Elias's first birthday, I chose not to celebrate in a hotel ballroom or a private dining club. Instead, we hosted the party at a small orphanage on the outskirts of town. The children there deserved joy just as much as my son did, and I wanted him to grow up with the values I nearly lost inside that house with Adrian. The courtyard filled with laughter, balloons, and bright paper decorations. Kids swarmed around the giant birthday cake, their smiles infectious. Maya handed out gift boxes, and my father held Elias proudly, letting the little ones poke at his chubby cheeks. When it was time for me to speak, I stepped onto the small wooden stage. "Today is special," I began, "not just because my son turns 1, but because his life gave me the strength to reclaim mine." The crowd applauded softly. A year ago, I was afraid. I was lost. But today, I stand here not as a victim, not as someone saved by others, but as a woman who fought her way back. We also announced a full renovation of the orphanage and funding for the education of every child there. Their cheers filled the air, warm and bright. At that moment, I truly felt free. After the candles were blown out and the children rushed toward slices of cake, Maya slipped her phone into my hand. Her expression told me the message wasn't good news, but it also wasn't something she wanted to hide from me. "Harper, you should see this," she murmured. On her screen was an update from my father's legal team. Adrian West had been arrested that morning for embezzling $2,000 from the small courier company that had hired him last month. No elaborate scheme, no sophistication, just a desperate act by a man who had never learned to stand on his own 2 feet. For a moment I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no rage, just a quiet, distant sadness for the man he could have been. But the second message hit harder. A note from the concierge at my old apartment complex said an elderly woman had been caught stealing clothes from a communal laundry line. When confronted, she screamed uncontrollably. Neighbors recognized her immediately. It was Patricia West, my former mother-in-law. I stared at the screen, feeling time slow around me. Patricia, who once bragged about designer handbags and mocked me for thrift store purchases, reduced to stealing worn shirts and towels. She had spiraled so far that even pride had abandoned her. Maya studied my face. "Are you all right?" I took a steady breath. I didn't want vengeance. I didn't want misery for them. I only wanted distance, protection, and a life where my son would never witness the cruelty I endured. "I'm okay," I whispered, truly. "This isn't my burden anymore." I handed Maya the phone and looked out at the courtyard again. Children laughing. Elias babbling in my father's arms. The warm sunlight settling on my skin like a blessing. The past wasn't chasing me anymore. It was dissolving behind me. When the celebration wound down, I wandered a little away from the crowd, just far enough to look back at everything with fresh eyes. The orphanage courtyard, once faded and overlooked, felt alive again. Children ran in circles, volunteers cleaned up tables, and my father held Elias like he was the most precious treasure on earth. A year ago, I would have been sitting silently in a cramped living room, afraid to ask for a fresh blanket or a decent meal. Now I was standing in the sunlight of a life I rebuilt with my own hands. Dad approached me, Elias still resting comfortably on his shoulder. "You did good today," he said quietly. I smiled. "We did good." He shook his head. "You led. I only followed." Those words meant more to me than any luxury, any business success, any financial safety he had ever offered me. For the first time in my adult life, I felt seen for my strength, not my weaknesses. As we packed decorations and prepared to leave, a little girl tugged at my dress. She couldn't have been older than 5. Her hair was messy, her smile shy. "Miss Harper, thank you," she said softly. "For the presents, and for the cake." I knelt down to her level. "You deserve beautiful things, sweetheart. All of you do." She hugged me, quick and warm, then ran off again. In that moment, I understood something I had missed for a long time. My story wasn't just about escaping cruelty. It was about stepping into purpose, about turning the darkest parts of my past into light for others. When we finally got into the car to head home, I looked out the window at the sun dipping behind the city skyline. Elias cooed softly beside me. My father rested his hand on mine. "Ready for the next chapter?" he asked. I nodded. More than ever. Back at the penthouse, after Elias drifted to sleep and Maya headed home, I stood alone by the massive window overlooking the city lights. That view used to intimidate me. It reminded me of how small I once felt, how powerless I believed I was. But tonight, the city looked different. It felt like a map of all the places I had walked through, survived, and risen above. I pressed my hand to the glass, remembering the woman who entered a shared hospital room with nothing but fear and a thrift store baby blanket, the woman who stayed quiet to keep the peace, the woman who worked herself to the bone while others lived comfortably off her sacrifices. That woman was gone. I wasn't defined by Adrian's betrayal, or Patricia's cruelty, or the years I spent shrinking myself to fit into a world that never made room for me. I was defined by the moment I chose to stand up, to walk out, to rebuild, to become someone my son would look up to. My father joined me at the window, hands in his pockets, gaze steady. "You know, Harper," he said softly, "I thought I had lost you for good. The day I found you in that hospital room, I realized how much life had taken from you." I turned toward him. "Life didn't take it, Dad. I gave too much of myself away. But now I know better, and I won't repeat that mistake." He nodded, a faint smile forming. "I'm proud of you, more than you'll ever know." We stood there together in silence, taking in the glow of the city. Elias's tiny breaths floated from the nursery, steady and peaceful. My past had finally settled into a quiet memory, my present was full, and my future stretched wide open, waiting. I whispered to myself, almost like a vow. "This is my new beginning, and I'm not looking back.